Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a hero. You're not Vasily Zaitsev or some propaganda poster come to life. You're just a half-starved conscript with bad boots and worse odds, handed a cracked scope and told to make history from behind a pile of rubble. You don't volunteer so much as get volunteered, and once you're in, you learn fast. The bullet with your name on it is a kindness. Most of them just say, indiscriminate. Before you go still and vanish into the ruins, do me one small favour. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing who's tuning in from around the world. If you want early access to more of these slow descents into forgotten lives, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. It starts with your brother. Or rather, it starts when he stops writing. He was already gone by the time you were old enough to shave, shipped off with the first wave of village boys, and swallowed by the front. His last letter came in spring. He said the mud was endless, that his rifle jammed more often than not, and that someone stole his boots in the night. He signed it with a joke, something about making stew from snow and horse meat, and then he was gone. Your mother read the letter twice, folded it carefully, and placed it beside the icon on the shelf. She hasn't moved it since. She doesn't talk about him anymore, which is how you know he's dead. When the man from the regional office arrives, he doesn't ask if you'd like to serve. He doesn't need to. You're 17 and wiry, your papers say you can read, and you haven't eaten properly in 3 days. That's close enough to a yes. The official calls it volunteering, but everyone knows that's just the word they use when the paperwork is already filled out. Your mother stands behind you in silence, lips drawn tight, arms crossed over her threadbare shawl. She doesn't try to stop them. Maybe she knows better. Maybe she's already said goodbye. They hand you a travel pass and tell you to report to the town hall. It's 20 kilometers away, and you don't own shoes. You leave at dawn with frost on your breath and bread in your pocket, stale, hard as stone, wrapped in old newspaper. When you pass the edge of the village, a few neighbours nod from behind shuttered windows. One old man waves, another mutters a prayer you don't hear. No one walks with you. It's not that kind of send-off. The road is frozen dirt and silence. You walk until your toes go numb, then walk a little more. There are no vehicles, no convoys, no heroic music playing in the distance. Just the sound of your own thin breathing and the slow crunch of frost beneath your heels. Halfway there, you eat the bread. It tastes like ash. You keep the newspaper. It has a photo of a soldier shaking hands with Stalin. Their smiles look painted on. The town hall smells like mildew and boiled cabbage. You're herded into a line of boys who look just like you. Skinny, pale, trying not to shiver. A man with thick glasses barks questions without waiting for answers. Another jots something on a clipboard, tears off a slip and pins it to your coat. No one tells you what it means. You're ushered into a truck with canvas sides and no heat. The engine stutters, coughs, and eventually rumbles to life. The boy next to you throws up on his boots within the first 10 minutes. No one says anything. You watch the horizon for signs of war and see only snow. By nightfall, you arrive at a processing depot, a skeletal collection of barracks strung together by mud and shouted orders. The guards don't look at you. The officers don't introduce themselves. You're pointed to a low building with steam leaking from the windows and told to get processed. Inside, a nurse with tired eyes jabs a needle into your arm, scribbles something onto your chart, and waves you away without looking up. You don't know what was in the syringe. You're not sure it matters. They give you a greatcoat that smells like another man's sweat. The sleeves are too long, the buttons mismatched, the inside seam still crusted with what might be blood. When you ask for gloves, the quartermaster laughs. Shoot straight and you'll earn some, he says, tossing you a dented mess tin instead. You ask about boots. He points to a pile of them in the corner. None match. You pick a pair that looks close to your size. They don't fit. You wear them anyway. Dinner is grey stew and a crust of bread. You eat every bite. The bunks are stacked 3 high. You get the top. It creaks when you climb in. The mattress is stuffed with straw and moves when you lie down. Lice, probably. You scratch and try to sleep. The boy below you coughs for 3 hours straight. No one checks on him. No one wants to get moved to his bunk if he dies. Morning comes with a whistle and a metal spoon clanging against a pipe. You line up outside, shivering in your thin layers. An officer with a clipboard walks down the line, calling out names and handing out assignments. Rifleman, machine gunner, supply detail, rifleman. When he gets to you, he squints at the paper, then frowns. Sniper selection, he says flatly. You scored well on the marksmanship test. You didn't take a test. You open your mouth to say something, then close it. He's already moved on. The boy behind you is crying. Quietly. Into his sleeve. Sniper selection. It sounds important, special, like something they might write songs about. You imagine yourself hidden in a tree line, breath still, finger steady, picking off enemies like shadows in a dream. That's how the posters looked anyway. Bold text, clean uniforms, sharp-eyed men watching the horizon with noble conviction. You saw one in the town square, right before the truck came. 1 shot, 1 victory. You remember that now. The man on the poster wasn't shaking. He wasn't wearing someone else's coat. His boots matched. You're given a new barrack assignment and told to report to a field across the road. That's all. No instructions, no training schedule, just a name and a direction. The sky's grey, the ground is wet, and your stomach turns with each step. You tell yourself it's nerves. It might be the stew. Either way, you're moving now. Too far in to turn back. Too new to understand what's ahead. You tug your coat tighter, press your hands into your armpits for warmth, and step into the cold. Behind you, someone laughs. It doesn't sound happy. The training ground isn't a proper field or base. It's a half-frozen slope of churned-up mud and snow, with broken fence posts marking the edge of what might once have been farmland. A few limp flags flutter over squat wooden sheds, and a crooked sign with hand-painted letters reads Sharpshooter, Preparation, Camp 3. No one calls it that. Everyone just says, the pit. The wind never stops here. It whips through your greatcoat and finds the seams in your socks, settles behind your eyes and burrows down your spine. You don't ask how long the training lasts. No one knows. Or if they do, they've stopped answering. The other recruits look like you, thin, stiff-backed, pretending they aren't terrified. You're lined up in the snow while instructors march back and forth, eyes sharp, voices hoarse. Most of them are older, scarred, with hollow cheeks and medals pinned to coats that haven't been cleaned since last winter. Some walk with limps. One wears an eye patch. None of them smile. You think they're supposed to inspire you, but mostly they just look cold. You're handed your rifle on the second day. It's not new, not even close. It's a Mosin Nagant, 7.62mm, with a scope that's chipped near the rim and a bolt that sticks if you don't force it just right. The barrel smells like old oil and something metallic, something older than rust. You turn it over and see scratches carved into the wooden stock, a name gouged in Cyrillic letters. You can't make out the last part. The first 3 are enough. Iva. You don't finish the name. You don't want to. There's dried blood crusted inside the bolt housing. Not much. Just a smear. Just enough to tell you this rifle has seen more war than you have fingers. You ask the armourer if it's been cleaned. He shrugs and lights a cigarette with trembling fingers. It still fires, he mutters, if you treat it like it's yours. But it's not yours. You know that already. Training isn't what you expected. There are no long lectures, no careful instruction. You're told to crawl through snow, to aim at distant targets shaped like silhouettes, to hold your breath while wind chaps your lips and the sun reflects off broken glass. One instructor yells, "Aim with your soul," as if that explains anything. Another slaps you for blinking too long. You learn more from watching the others than from anything the officers say. You spend hours prone in the snow, cheek pressed to cold metal, shoulder bruised from recoil. Your elbows bleed through your sleeves. You don't complain. The boy next to you does once. He disappears the next morning. No one mentions him again. When you ask where he went, the instructor spits in the snow and tells you to focus on your breathing. They test you on more than just shooting. They test patience, endurance, willingness to lie still for hours, while bugs crawl into your ears and your fingers go numb. You're trained to calculate bullet drop without equipment, to memorize terrain at a glance, to distinguish friend from foe through cracked glass at 300 meters. You're taught to make every shot count. You're also taught how to shoot twice, just in case. The food is worse than before, mostly potatoes when there are any, and something like soup that smells faintly of old boots. You eat it anyway. The lice are worse now too. You've started naming them, not as a joke, just as a way to feel like you still own something. The others do it too. You catch one boy singing to his shirt collar. He doesn't last long. They pull him out of his bunk before sunrise. He leaves his boots behind. One night, during a cold snap, the pipes freeze and a trainee dies in his sleep. No one knows until morning. They take him away on a stretcher and don't fill the bunk. You sleep next to the empty mattress and try not to look at it. The next day, the instructors are quieter. Not kinder, just quieter. You fire your first live round at a pig carcass hung from a tree. The recoil makes your shoulder throb for hours. The second round feels easier. The third is perfect. You don't smile. Someone claps you on the back. It doesn't help. Later that day, they make you practice breathing control while lying face down in a ditch. The mud soaks through your coat. You can't feel your toes. Your breath comes out in fog. You imagine the target is real, that it's a man, that he's blinking and breathing and thinking about his mother. You fire anyway. You hit him between the eyes. At night, some of the boys trade stories about what they'll do when the war ends. You stay silent. You don't have a plan. You're not sure you believe in afterward. You wrap your coat tighter around yourself and listen to the wind press against the window frame. Outside, the world is frozen. Inside, it's not much better. Toward the end of training, if you can call it that, you're brought into a small room with a single oil lamp and a map pinned to the wall. An officer in a clean uniform tells you that you've been selected for the front. He doesn't say congratulations. He doesn't ask if you're ready. He just hands you a piece of paper with your name, an assignment number, and a location you don't recognize. You'll be partnered, he says, for now. You nod, though the paper shakes in your hand. Your name is spelled wrong. That night, you pack your things. It doesn't take long. One mess tin, one dull knife, one cracked pair of binoculars, the rifle, of course. You clean it carefully, brushing away flakes of blood and dirt, oiling the bolt like the instructor showed you. You don't try to sand down the carved name. That feels wrong somehow. You just whisper to it, as if it might listen, as if it might remember you when no one else will. The truck arrives at dawn, no ceremony, no farewell, just your name on a manifest and a grunt pointing to the back. You climb in beside 3 others, each clutching their own battered rifle, like it might float them through what's coming. The engine stutters, then catches. The wheels lurch forward through slush and salt. You don't know where you're going, only that it's west. That's where the war is. That's where everyone eventually ends up. The front isn't a line, it's a smear. The truck drops you somewhere outside a city with no signs left standing. No roads that haven't split open from shellfire. You don't learn the name of the place. If it even has one left, no one's saying it. The buildings are skeletal, all rebar ribs and cracked concrete skin. Everything smells like wet plaster and old fire. You expect chaos. What you find is quiet, too quiet. Like a grave before anyone's had the decency to climb in. Your new unit is camped in the basement of a collapsed post office. Someone's painted a red star on the door, in drying blood or rust. It's hard to tell which. Inside, soldiers hunch over mess tins, rubbing mud from their sleeves or scratching at fleas. No one looks up when you enter. You report to a thin man with a clipboard and a voice like crushed gravel. He scans your assignment paper, clicks his tongue, and jerks a thumb toward a corner where a man is oiling a rifle in silence. "Misha," the officer says, "you're his shadow now." Misha doesn't greet you. He finishes oiling the bolt, reassembles the rifle with careful fingers, and stands. He's older than you, maybe 30, maybe 50. Hard to tell under the grime. His uniform is faded and patched. One sleeve is stitched shut where the lower arm should be. He sees you looking and raises an eyebrow. "Trigger hand's still good," he mutters. Then he slings the rifle over his back and walks out without waiting. You follow. You spend the rest of the day in a half-ruined apartment block that overlooks a crumpled boulevard. The floor is slick with melted snow and broken glass. Misha picks a corner where the ceiling hasn't collapsed and props a board across two windowsills. He lays his rifle across it like a priest setting up an altar. You take position beside him, barely breathing, trying to ignore the cold sinking through your knees. Across the street, the rubble shifts occasionally. Sniper bait, he calls it. Nothing moves without a reason here. Misha doesn't talk much. When he does, it's in short phrases. Watch the corner, listen to the wind, count to 3 before you fire. His voice is low even, almost bored. You ask if he's killed many. He shrugs. "I've been here a while." That's all he says. Later, he shares a boiled potato from his coat pocket. You eat it without thinking. It's the warmest thing you've tasted in weeks. Your first target is a German courier. You spot him mid-morning, weaving through the ruins with a satchel on his hip and a helmet too big for his head. He moves quickly, but not carefully, like someone who's run this route a dozen times without incident. He can't be more than 17, maybe 16. His cheeks are pink from the cold, and his breath fogs the air in bursts as he jogs between cover. You almost don't raise your rifle. Misha says nothing, just nudges your elbow with his remaining hand. You line up the shot. Your scope fogs. You wipe it. You breathe slow, like they taught you. You press the trigger gently. The rifle bucks against your shoulder with a noise that seems much too loud. Across the street, the courier stumbles mid-step, clutches his side, and folds to the ground like his strings were cut. He doesn't move after that. Your stomach tightens. You try to breathe. You fail. You scramble to the corner of the room and vomit into the plaster dust. Misha doesn't scold you. He doesn't say anything at all. He just lays his rifle flat and pulls out another potato. This one he doesn't offer. He chews slowly, watching the window. Later that evening, back in the post office basement, your name is called during roll. A lieutenant you've never met announces your first confirmed kill, praises your quick instincts, and says something about defending the people's revolution. You stand there in your filthy coat, stomach still hollow, as he scribbles something on a clipboard. He says there will be a commendation. He calls it an honour. He mispronounces your last name. The others nod without interest. One claps you on the shoulder. Another asks if you salvaged the courier's satchel. You didn't. You don't mention that you almost missed. You don't mention that you can still see his face when you blink. They tell you to get used to it. You nod, because that's what they want. Then you go upstairs and sit in the dark for an hour, picking at your fingernails until they bleed. You don't sleep that night. The floor is too cold. Your mind is louder than the wind. You keep thinking about the helmet, the way it bounced slightly when he fell. You wonder if his family's still alive, if they'll ever know where he died, if anyone will move his body before the rats find it. Then you remember your brother and decide it's better not to think too much. You press your fingers into your eyes until you see stars. The next morning, Misha is already packed. He doesn't explain why. Just tells you to keep your scope clear and watch for movement near the church tower. Then he shakes your hand, left-handed, and nods once. You don't ask where he's going. You don't ask if he'll come back. That feels like tempting fate. He walks out the same way he came in, without fanfare, without sound. Your next assignment comes from a sergeant who smells like gun oil and cheap vodka. He points you toward a building on the far side of the block and tells you to pick a nest. No partner, no briefing, just a general direction and a new sector to cover. You wrap your scarf tighter and head out before he changes his mind. The building is 3 floors tall, but the stairs only go up 2 before collapsing. You climb the rest with your back pressed to the wall and your rifle slung across your chest. At the top, there's a room with half a ceiling and a view of the same boulevard, only farther north. You set up between a shattered wardrobe and the remains of a stove. The floor is damp. The air smells like warm rot and wet cement. You lie down, cheek to the stock, eye to the chipped glass, and wait for something to move. No one tells you who to shoot. You just know. You feel it in the silence. You feel it in your hands. Time passes, maybe weeks, maybe months. It's hard to keep track. You're now stationed outside the city Leningrad. Winter doesn't just arrive, it stalks. It seeps in slowly at first, curling through cracks in brick and creeping beneath your collar, testing your softness before it commits. Then one morning, it stops pretending and settles across the land like a curse. The sky loses its colour. The wind sharpens. The air tastes like glass, and every surface you touch bites back. You're stationed with a rotating sniper detail just outside the city. What used to be the city anyway. Now it's rubble and ice and silence interrupted by the occasional shell blast in the distance. You sleep in the corner of a frozen warehouse with 20 others, crammed in among crates and broken pallets, your breath rising in small grey clouds. The roof leaks. The walls creak. The cold is smarter than you. It finds your soft spots. It learns how you move and waits for you to forget yourself. The first thing to go is your nose. You stop feeling it after the second day. Then your fingers, even inside gloves. You flex them constantly. At first from habit, then from necessity. They crack where the skin folds. Blood freezes in the creases. You wrap them in cloth at night, and the cloth hardens like bark. The boots they gave you back at the depot were already stiff and uneven, but now they're worse, frozen in odd shapes from days of wet slush and hurried drying near open flames. The left one has split near the toe. You stuff newspaper inside. It helps for about 20 minutes. The enemy's out there somewhere, but they've gone quiet too. Not because they're gone, but because it's too cold to fight. War hibernates in deep winter, like everything else. You still go out every day, rifle slung across your back, scope clouding the moment you breathe too hard. You crouch in buildings that no longer have roofs, lean against trees that creak like they're ready to fall, lie flat in the snow until your knees lock and your bladder aches and your ribs feel brittle. Sometimes you see a flicker of movement, a coat too clean, a helmet too round, and you raise your rifle. But mostly you don't fire. Mostly you just freeze slowly, hoping the enemy is doing the same. The lice are still alive though, somehow. They thrive in the seams of your coat, in the folds of your shirt, in the hem of your trousers. You stop trying to get rid of them. You just scratch until you bleed and hope no one notices you twitching during observation. Everyone else twitches too, so it's not like you stand out. Hygiene is a memory now. You bathe only when ordered, and even then, it's a metal bucket and a rag in water that smells like old rust and dead leaves. You clean your rifle more often than your body. It seems more deserving. Rations arrive every few days, sometimes in crates, sometimes just in sacks dumped at the warehouse door. You get black bread hard enough to break teeth, and frozen lumps of something they claim is meat. You hold it under your arm to thaw before eating. It tastes like grease and gristle and memory. You eat it anyway. The cold burns calories fast, and your ribs are starting to show through your coat. At night, your stomach grumbles loud enough to make the man next to you shift in his sleep. You apologize. He doesn't answer. You learn tricks. You learn to cup your hands in your armpits before touching metal. You learn that breathing through your mouth makes your teeth ache. You learn how to piss quickly and precisely to avoid freezing your trousers, and how to tell the difference between snow you can eat and snow that's been pissed on. You learn to move slower, to waste less heat, to not blink too fast or your lashes will freeze together. You stop complaining, not because you're brave, because no one listens. Everyone else is just as cold and just as tired and just as unwilling to admit they might not make it to spring. There's a boy named Oleg who sleeps near you. You don't know much about him. He came in with the last resupply unit. He doesn't talk unless spoken to. He has bad teeth and good boots, and once offered you a boiled potato without asking for anything in return. That made you trust him more than most. You talk sometimes in the late hours when the wind screams, and the rest of the men snore or cough themselves to sleep. He tells you he wants to be a school teacher when the war ends. You tell him you want to go home. Neither of you say what you really mean, which is that you doubt either thing will happen. One night, a shell lands somewhere too close. The building shudders. Dust falls from the ceiling like snow. You both duck instinctively, but nothing follows. The cold presses in tighter after that. Like it noticed the weakness and decided to punish you. You sleep in your coat, your gloves, your scarf wrapped around your face until you can barely breathe. You dream of fire, but it doesn't warm you. You wake up colder than when you started. You stop keeping track of days. The sun barely rises, and when it does, it hangs low and weak, like an old man's eye. You mark time by meals and patrols, and moments when the frost creeps a little farther up your sleeves. You haven't fired your rifle in a week, but you still clean it every night. Ritual more than duty, like prayer, except you believe the rifle will answer. Then one morning you wake up and Oleg doesn't. He's curled in on himself, blanket tight, boots still on, face turned toward the wall. At first you think he's asleep, then you notice how still he is. Not frozen stiff, not yet, just still. You reach over, shake his shoulder, nothing. His eyes are half open, his breath is gone. You call for the corporal. He grunts, confirms, makes a note on his clipboard, and walks away. No one mourns. There's no time. No fuel for a fire. No ground soft enough to dig. Someone drags the body outside and covers it with snow. You try not to watch. You try not to think about what his mother will be told, or if she'll be told at all. You just sit there, flexing your fingers, willing the blood to keep moving. An hour later, someone hands you Oleg's gloves. They're better than yours, lined with fur, still warm from his hands. You hesitate for a second, then you take them. You don't say thank you. You just slip them on and return to your post. The snow crunches beneath your boots. The wind moans through the cracks in the wall. You don't look back. They move you out of the warehouse not long after Oleg dies. No explanation. Just a name shouted at roll call and a wave toward the supply truck. You don't ask why. You shoulder your rifle, grab your pack, and climb into the back with 3 other men who don't look at you. The truck rattles over frozen ruts and broken glass, past skeleton buildings and frozen corpses half sunk in the snow. You stop trying to figure out which side they belong to. After a while, you stop seeing them at all. Your new post is an old church tower, or what's left of one. Most of the roof has caved in. The bell is gone, and the stained glass has been shattered into glittering frost across the floor. One beam of sunlight still slants through the open window each morning, falling across the pulpit like a failed sermon. The stairwell to the tower is barely intact, and your boots slip on each icy step as you climb. The whole structure sways in the wind, groaning softly like it's remembering how to die. The tower overlooks a road that used to matter. You can tell from the wreckage, half tracks rusted into place. A burned-out tram twisted around a crater, old barricades draped in snow like abandoned stage props. Once, people probably fought hard over this street. Now it's just empty. A corridor of frozen dust and forgotten plans. Your orders are to watch it. For what? They don't say. Maybe for movement, maybe for ghosts. You settle in behind a pile of rubble beneath the window, stacking bricks to brace your rifle, and unrolling a length of old curtain to rest your elbows on. It smells like mildew and something sweeter, like rotted incense. You lay flat on your stomach, chin to the buttstock, and stare through the chipped scope. A brick wall with a doorway sits 200 metres downrange. You count the holes in it, 47. Then you count the cracks between the holes. Then you stop counting and just watch. The first day, you shift every hour. Your neck cramps, your knees ache. You move just enough to stay warm, just enough to keep blood moving through your fingers. You scan from left to right, right to left. Street, window, corner, street again. The second day, you stop shifting. It wastes too much heat. You just lie there, motionless, breathing shallow, counting each exhale like it might be your last, that doesn't fog the lens. No one relieves you, not officially. You sleep in the alcove behind the altar, on a bed of plaster and ash, wrapped in your coat and curtain. You piss in a tin can. You eat when you remember to. Mostly bread, sometimes the dry ends of sausage. The wind howls through the cracked walls at night, and once you think you hear a hymn, low, broken, echoing in the empty nave. But when you sit up to listen, there's only silence and the shifting creak of old beams. You stop speaking after the third day. There's no one to talk to, and talking makes your throat burn. Your voice feels unnecessary, like a relic you've forgotten the use for. Still, sometimes you hear it, not out loud, just behind your ear, soft and strange, whispering numbers or names you don't recognise. Once it says your mother's name. Once it laughs, you don't respond. You press your face into the scope and think about what it would take to fall asleep without closing your eyes. You start hallucinating movement, not the kind that makes you panic, the kind that makes you blink, squint, and second-guess your own pupils. A glint of light in a window, a flutter of cloth in a doorway, a ripple in the snow. You raise your rifle more often than you fire. You begin to wonder if any of it is real. You begin to wonder if that matters. Your bladder fills at the worst times, mid-shift, mid-stare. You hold it until your guts twist and your thighs shake. Then you crawl to the corner, relieved in short bursts, and return to the scope without wiping your hands. Hygiene has become a theory, something that belongs to other people, in other wars. Sometimes you see rats. They move quick, darting between collapsed pews, rustling through hymnals turned to mulch. You don't bother with them. They don't bother with you. You're both just occupying the same rotting sanctuary, waiting for someone else to end it. At night, you try to sleep. You lie on your side, curled into the curve of your coat, with your rifle clutched against your chest, like a lover. Your fingers twitch in your dreams. Your ears ring with distant shells. You wake often, unsure of where you are. The church tower looks different in the dark, taller, hungrier, like it's grown teeth. You start to forget how long you've been there. The days bleed into each other, all grey sky and grey stone and grey thoughts. Your scope has a smudge you can't clean. It shifts just enough to make you doubt every shot. Not that you've fired recently, not that there's anything to shoot. Then finally they send someone. You hear footsteps on the stairs, light ones, quick, nervous. A boy arrives at the top of the tower, rifle slung across his back, cheeks raw from windburn. He introduces himself too quickly, words tumbling over each other. He says he's 16. You don't ask if that's true. You just nod and point toward the window. He moves clumsily, hands shaking as he sets up beside you. His rifle is newer. His boots are dry. His eyes are wide. You tell him to watch the left corner of the street. You tell him to breathe slow. You tell him not to speak unless he sees something. He nods too many times. You stare at him for a while. He doesn't meet your eyes. You've already seen how this ends. That night, a shell falls somewhere nearby. Not close enough to hit the tower, but close enough to shake it. You feel the whole structure lurch. Stones fall. Dust rains from the ceiling. The boy gasps and drops his rifle. You don't move. When the rumbling stops, he says he needs some air. You don't stop him. You just close your eyes. In the morning, he's not in the tower. You don't report it. You just return to your perch, adjust your rifle, and look back through the scope. There are still 47 holes in the wall. It happens after one of the coldest weeks you've known. The air sharpens into knives, the wind never stops howling, and your fingers stop bleeding only because they stop feeling altogether. You've stopped logging your kills. There's no time for it, no paper that isn't soaked through, and no point. You shoot because you're told to, because something moves, because silence makes your brain itch. You're posted near a collapsed theatre this time, watching a crossroad no one has crossed in days. Your body curled like a dead dog behind a wall of snow and broken bricks. Then on the 6th day, the Germans push forward. Not in force, just a handful of scouts creeping through the outer rubble. One by one, they pass your scope. You breathe. You fire again and again. They fall. One tries to crawl back. You wait for him to call out. He doesn't. You finish it. Someone later tells you the count was 22. You don't remember 22 faces. You barely remember pulling the trigger that many times. You only remember the twitch in your wrist and the weight of the bolt sliding home. You remember how your knuckles cracked from the cold and your finger bled onto the trigger. But you don't remember 22. Maybe they just needed a number to send up the chain. Or maybe someone was watching. You hope not. An officer arrives 2 days later, not one you know. His coat is clean, lined with real fur, and his boots match. He introduces himself with too many syllables and not enough warmth. He doesn't shake your hand. Instead, he informs you that you've been selected for temporary reassignment, a phrase that tastes like rust. You're taken from your post, marched across the snow, and loaded into a truck without explanation. You don't ask. Your legs hurt too much to argue. They bring you to a base behind the line, far enough from the front that the buildings still have roofs, and the chimneys smoke with something better than burnt ration crates. You're shown to a small office with a lamp, a typewriter, and a large red star painted neatly on the wall. A man with polished boots and a camera around his neck is waiting for you. He greets you like an old friend. You've never seen him before in your life. He sits you down and tells you he's from the Propaganda Bureau. We heard about your success, he says. Very efficient, very patriotic. He opens a notebook, already half filled, and begins to ask questions. How long have you served? How many fascists have you killed? What inspired you to fight for the motherland? You answer as best you can. Short, slow responses delivered through a voice gone hoarse from disuse. He nods politely, scribbles things down, and occasionally corrects you. Let's say you killed the lead officer first, he suggests, even though you can't remember who was in front. And mention that you prayed before taking the shot, even though you didn't. He smiles as he writes. You sit there, unsure whether to feel flattered or nauseous. A photographer arrives and begins clicking the shutter before you've even stood up. He poses you against the window, with sunlight haloing your frostbitten cheek. He doesn't ask if he can touch you, just adjusts your collar and tells you to look proud. You don't. You try, but your lips don't move the right way anymore. So he tells you to look tired instead. Authentic, he calls it. Afterward, someone brings a plate of food, real meat, warm bread, tea with sugar. You eat it without tasting. It fills the hollow, but it doesn't do anything else. The officer who brought you in reappears with a small red booklet and a folded certificate. Commendation for valor, he says, issued on behalf of the party and the people. Your name is printed beneath the seal. It's misspelled. Your last name is missing a letter. The first name isn't yours at all, it's your brother's. You stare at it for a moment, then fold it and place it in your pocket. You're told there will be a write-up in the local paper. Hero of the People's Front, they call you. You wonder if your mother will see it, if she'll believe it, if she'll notice the wrong name. Probably not. You haven't written to her in months. You're not sure what you'd say anyway. That you're doing your best? That you're still cold? That you stopped dreaming because the dreams were worse than the days? They give you the rest of the day off. You're allowed to shower, Scrub the lice from your hair. Change into clean underclothes. The water is warm, though the pipes groan like they're not used to it. You don't recognize the body in the mirror. It's thinner than you remember. Pale, hollow in the face, the eyes stare too long. You dry off with a rag that smells like bleach. Put your uniform back on and sit on the bunk until someone knocks. It's the same officer, now less friendly. "You're needed back at the line," he says. "Transport leaves at dawn." That's it. No medal, no ceremony, no fresh boots. Just a ride back to where you came from, and a new copy of the story you didn't write, with your name spelled wrong, and the number 22 circled in red pencil. You sleep that night, in a cot that doesn't smell like mould, beneath a blanket that doesn't scratch. You stare at the ceiling and wait for the dreams. None come. Just the echo of camera shutters and the feel of a trigger under your frozen finger. In the morning, you're loaded back onto a truck. Same kind of truck, same rickety frame. The boards beneath you creak. Your rifle rests in your lap, clean and cold. The wind seeps through the canvas sides and stings your cheeks. You wonder if the paper with your name on it will ever make it home. You wonder if it matters. You return to the front with your coat still stiff from the warmth it never held. The air smells like boiled socks and distant fire. The base is different now, thinner somehow. Fewer bodies around the fire barrel. Fewer voices in the dark. The ones who are left don't look up when you pass. Their faces are bruised with cold, their eyes glassy and half turned inward, like they've already gone somewhere quieter. You're assigned to a new unit. No introductions, no names, just a new ruin to perch in and a sector to watch. Your scope fogs the same way, your boots leak the same way, your hands shake in the same rhythms. But something is different, and you notice it before the sun rises on your second day back. There's a man standing behind the firing line. Not close, just far enough to avoid suspicion, just near enough to see everything. He wears a long clean coat, fur collar, red armband. He doesn't carry a rifle, just a leather-bound notebook and a pencil sharpened to a needle. You don't ask who he is, you already know. The commissar doesn't introduce himself. He doesn't shout or issue commands. He watches. That's worse. You catch him studying your posture, the way you breathe, the seconds you take between spotting and firing. Sometimes he writes, sometimes he just nods faintly and walks away, lips pressed tight. You find yourself wondering how many pages are filled with your name, how many ticks are beside it. You didn't realize how much quieter the front could feel when someone behind you is listening. A week in, he speaks to you for the first time. It's during chow, such as it is. You're chewing something grey and chewy that might once have been meat when he slides onto the crate beside you like a ghost. His coat doesn't even rustle. He smiles too long, then asks, "Why did you miss your last shot?" You pause mid-chew, swallow. "I didn't." He taps the notebook. "Your log says the target moved. Was that poor timing? Or poor nerves?" You stare at him. Not with anger, not with confusion. Just the hollow stare of someone who's seen frostbite turn toes to soup and lice hatch behind their ears. There was rubble in the way. He ducked. The commissar nods. Then he closes the notebook and stands. No affirmation, no accusation. Just a sound. Then he walks away and doesn't look back. You finish the rest of your ration, even though your mouth tastes like chalk. After that, you start watching him as much as the street. When you lie prone in the attic, eye to the scope, you keep one ear turned for footsteps behind you. When you clean your rifle, you triple check the chamber, then wonder if he's writing down how long it took. You start firing quicker, not because you're confident, but because you're afraid of what hesitation might mean. You try not to miss. You try too hard. One day, you do miss. You don't even know how. Your aim was steady. Your breath was right. But the bullet skims off the edge of a beam, sparks, and the target drops out of sight. You reload fast, hoping no one saw. But the next morning, you're called in for review. It's not a punishment. It's worse. It's a conversation. He meets you in a small canvas-lined tent. There's a single stool. A tin stove in the corner gives off more smoke than heat. He motions for you to sit. You do. He paces for a while, then says, "Tell me, what is your understanding of ideological discipline?" You blink. "Sir?" He repeats it, slower this time, like you're deaf. Ideological. Discipline. What does that mean to a sniper? You give the answer you think he wants. Something about loyalty, duty, the party. He nods along like a teacher listening to a child recite lines. Then he asks you what you think fear does to a soldier. Before you can answer, he tells you. It makes them pause. Pausing costs lives. The enemy doesn't pause. The bullet doesn't pause. You shouldn't either. You leave with a new hole chewed in your gut. You don't eat dinner that night. Your hands twitch in your sleep. You stop counting kills after that. You stop thinking about who you're shooting or why. The faces blur. Some wear helmets, some wear coats with no insignia at all. One looks like a boy you trained with her, same jawline, same squint. You fire anyway. Better to be certain. Better not to pause. The commissar is always nearby, not in the same building, but close. You see his silhouette sometimes, standing under a broken archway, watching like a hawk that doesn't need to blink. Once you catch him scribbling something as you lower your rifle, you start to sweat even though the room is freezing. You don't expect to be assigned a partner again. Not after the last few months, not after everything. But then your name appears on the morning roll call, paired with another, Katya Orlova. The officer reads it without emotion, like he's listing rations. You wait for clarification, but none comes. He points you toward a rendezvous spot by the shell of a train depot and moves on. You sling your rifle, adjust your coat, and go without comment. You're not sure whether you're dreading the company or the silence it might break. She's already there when you arrive, perched on a beam of scorched steel, whittling a piece of wood with a small folding knife. Her uniform is patched in the same places as yours. Her cheek is smudged with something that might be grease or soot. She looks up, squints against the morning glare, and gives you a quick nod. You the quiet one. You nod back. She tosses the bit of wood aside and hops down. Good, I talk enough for both of us. That turns out to be true. On the first day, she talks about her shoes. Not these, the ones she had before the war. Soft leather, red laces. On the second, she talks about her father's cooking and how everything he made ended up tasting like sausage, even the cabbage. On the third, she talks about the siege, how she lived through Stalingrad, shot her first man while bleeding from her ears, and once used her rifle butt to cave in a German's jaw when her ammo ran dry. She tells it all casually, like she's describing an especially bad harvest. She's good, better than you. Her shot grouping is tighter, her eye is faster, her fingers don't shake when the wind bites. She notices things you don't. Movement in windows, the glint of sun off glass, the faint shiver of fabric in a breeze that means someone's behind it. She never hesitates, not once. You find yourself trusting her more than you want to. You try not to like her, that's the first mistake, but she makes it hard. She gives you the better corner of the building. She shares the warm end of her scarf when yours ices over. She tells jokes that don't make sense until 3 hours later, and by then, you're laughing into your sleeve while watching for silhouettes across the courtyard. It feels wrong, unfamiliar, like breathing clean air in a room that should still be choking on smoke. You forget to be careful with your thoughts. That's the second mistake. It's a quiet week. The Germans are regrouping somewhere deeper in the city, and most of your time is spent lying prone in an abandoned apartment above what used to be a bakery. The window frame is blown out. The floor is dusted with flour and rat droppings. You stack bricks to support your rifle and wedge a bent ladle under the buttstock to keep it steady. Katya calls it creative engineering. She says if you survive, you should patent it. You smile without meaning to. The morning it happens, the sun is barely up. A thin gold line cuts across the floor, catching the dust in a slow, lazy spiral. Katya is whispering about sausages again, how the best ones are always slightly burnt, how you can smell when they're ready without looking. Her voice is low, rhythmic. You're half listening, half scanning the alley for movement. It's peaceful. Or it would be, if you didn't know better by now. Then she stops talking. Not in a pause, not mid-thought, just gone. The sound cuts off like someone turned a dial. There's a dull thud beside you. You turn and see her body slumped awkwardly. Her legs still crossed, head tilted back against the wall. Blood is already spreading under her shoulder, dark and fast, soaking through the fabric like ink. Her rifle slides from her lap and clatters onto the floor. You don't look at her face. That's the third mistake, or maybe the only smart thing you do. You keep your head down and don't move for 10 minutes. Not because of fear, because of protocol. You know how this works. Hit the one on the left, wait for the partner to react, then fire again. You've done it yourself. You become stillness. Your breath barely rises. Your hands don't twitch. Eventually, you pull her scarf off gently, drape it over her face, and crawl backward, out of sight. You don't take her gear. You don't search her pockets. You don't even take the better boots. Though your left one still leaks. You just crawl. The officer who assigned you is leaning against a burned-out truck when you return. He doesn't look surprised to see you alone. He checks something off a list and says, "Don't mention her." Then he walks away before you can answer. You don't ask for another partner. You don't hear her name again. That night, you sleep with your rifle against your chest and her scarf stuffed into the corner of your pack. It still smells faintly like grease and ash and something too faint to name. Time doesn't move the way it used to. It drags when you're still, then disappears in chunks. A week passes without you noticing. Then a month collapses under itself, like a rotten beam. You're posted to a new town, or what's left of it. The street signs are gone. The buildings are collapsed in strange, unnatural ways, like they were punched from the inside. You ask someone the name of the place. They shrug. You stop asking. Your days are the same. You wake to cold air and the ache in your spine. You piss behind a half-standing wall and hope the wind doesn't carry it back on your boots. You eat something hard and dry and tasteless. You clean your rifle by habit. You take position. You stare. You shoot. You sleep. That's it. The line between one day and the next is thin, brittle, and always covered in ash. There are bodies everywhere. Not just fresh ones, old ones, half frozen, half buried, some still slumped over where they fell months ago. They don't get moved unless they're in the way. You pass them on your way to your post, sometimes stepping over limbs with your eyes down. You stop checking uniforms. It doesn't matter anymore. German, Soviet, civilian, whatever they were, they're not that now. You start keeping a journal, not out of sentiment, out of survival. The pages are from a ledger you pulled off a dead quartermaster. Most of the ink is already smeared. You write in charcoal. You don't write names, just dates, numbers, a rough count of shots fired, maybe a note on what you ate, or whether your hands bled through the bandages again. Some pages have tallies, others just question marks. You meet soldiers who share your rations, pass you cigarettes, laugh at jokes you don't quite follow, and the next day, you realise you've already forgotten their voices. There's a medic with red hair who binds your wrist after a misfire. She tells you to come back in a few days to check the swelling. You don't. You couldn't find the aid station again if you tried. One night, during shelling, you take cover beside a corpse. He's face down, coat torn, ribs showing through the gaps. You wait there for nearly an hour, pressed against his back, like he might shield you from the blast. When the noise fades, you whisper, "Thank you," without thinking. The next morning, he's gone. Someone must have moved him. You never find out who. The weather changes again. The snow turns to slush, then to mud, then to flies. They cling to everything. Your canteen, your fingers, the edge of your scope. You wipe them off again, and still they return, drawn by the rot that no one has time to bury. Your socks are always damp. Your trench foot comes back. You stop telling anyone. You figure if it gets bad enough, you'll just stop walking and solve the problem that way. The worst part is the faces, not the ones you remember, the ones you almost remember. The flashes, the dreams. You see them sometimes just before you fall asleep. Eyes half blown out, mouths open mid-scream, features caught between memory and imagination. You shoot someone in the street, and then days later, you see their face on someone else, and flinch. You start to wonder if they're following you, not as ghosts, just as loose, unclaimed parts. Bits of jawline, teeth, freckles, scars, floating, reattaching themselves to whoever passes by next. You try drawing them once. You find a pencil stub and sketch on the back of a supply form. The face you end up with doesn't look like anyone. You burn it in a cigarette tin and don't try again. One day, a commander asks how many confirmed kills you have. You say, "I've stopped counting." He laughs like you're joking. He slaps you on the back and says, "That's the spirit." You think about punching him. Instead, you nod and walk away. You pass a mirror sometime in early spring. Not a real mirror, a shard of polished steel in a bombed-out tailor's shop. For a moment, you think you see someone else. You brace, you look, but it's you. Just older, thinner, eyes sunken and rimmed with cracked skin. Your lips are split. Your gums bleed when you eat. You lift your cap and see a patch of scalp that's going bald from stress or lice or both. You don't look again after that. Your letters home go unwritten. You used to try sometimes, scratching a line or two into spare paper, pretending to remember your mother's address. You stopped when you realised you might not recognise your own handwriting. It looked too neat, like someone else had borrowed your hand for a moment and hadn't returned it the same. Sometimes you think you see Katya out of the corner of your eye. Not her exactly, just her shape, her stance, the ghost of her voice muttering something about burnt sausages. You don't turn to check. You know she's not there, but it's better to pretend for a second than admit you're truly alone. One night, you dream about your mother's voice. Not her face, just her voice. She's humming something low and steady, something she used to sing while cooking, back when winters were something that happened outside the walls, not inside your skin. In the dream, you can smell onions and fried dough, feel the heat of the stove, hear the creak of the kitchen floor. When you wake, your cheek is pressed to the butt of your rifle, and you're weeping quietly into the scope. You don't wipe your face, you just lie there, watching the street that no longer matters, waiting for the next shape to move. It starts with a sound you haven't heard in weeks. Artillery, close and fast, pounding the edges of your sector, like fists slamming on a door. The Germans are pushing again, this time with more than patrols and scattered fire. You feel it in the ground first, then in your chest. Then the orders start coming down the line. Short, panicked bursts over the radio. Shouted directives from officers whose names you barely know. Fall back, regroup, hold the junction until the second wave arrives. No one explains what the second wave is. You and what's left of your unit retreat through alleyways littered with broken crates and empty bottles. The air smells like grease, brick dust, and the kind of smoke that sticks to your lungs. You pass men too injured to move and others who don't notice they're still bleeding. One stumbles in front of you and grabs your arm. You help him to the wall, lean him against it, and move on without looking back. You can't carry anyone. You're not even sure you can carry yourself. Then the officer pulls you aside. He's younger than you expected, clean-shaven, tight-lipped, too alert for someone in a war zone. His uniform is regulation perfect, which makes you distrust him immediately. He looks at you like someone studying a broken machine. Not out of concern, but calculation. He tells you calmly that your orders have changed. You're to remain behind, hidden, rifle ready. If anyone from your unit retreats through the fallback point without authorization, you are to shoot them. Not wound, not warn, eliminate. For morale, he says. Like it's a reason that should satisfy you. You stare at him. He stares back. You think about asking if this is A joke, but the look in his eyes kills the question. He hands you a slip of paper, signed, stamped, neatly folded. The ink is still wet. He says you'll be officially commended for your service. You're protecting the integrity of the line. You're defending the courage of the men who stay. You're inspiring discipline through sacrifice. He doesn't say whose. You set up in the husk of a watchtower overlooking the junction. The building is more whole than structure. Walls cracked and sagging, roof long since blown away. You find a corner where your back is protected and build a crude rest for your rifle out of bricks and sandbags. The scope fogs slightly from your breath. You exhale through your nose and wait. The first wave passes through in order. Faces hollow, boots dragging, weapons clutched like crutches. Some glance toward your perch, others keep their eyes on the ground. You track them without moving your finger. None of them break, not yet. The second group is different, stragglers. One man sprints alone, rifle gone, coat torn at the sleeve. He doesn't slow as he nears the checkpoint. You aim for the chest and pause, just for a moment, just long enough to feel the weight of the silence pressing down on you. Then you fire. He drops, doesn't scream, doesn't move. The other men don't stop. They keep going. The next one is older, limping, dragging his pack behind him like a corpse. He's crying, not loudly, not theatrically, just leaking tears, slow and steady. You fire. He collapses onto his knees first, then forward, into the mud. His helmet rolls into the ditch and disappears. The third is the one you remember. Young, probably younger than you were when you started. He doesn't run. He walks with slow, careful steps, holding something in both hands. You line up the shot. You squeeze the trigger. He drops. Later, when you climb down to confirm the hits, you find a photo folded in his hand. A girl, maybe 6, standing beside a river. Behind her, a small house with a tin roof and laundry on the line. The back of the photo has a name written in smudged pencil. You fold it back into his hand and walk away. The officer is waiting for you when you return. He smiles like you've just won a raffle, tells you your commendation has already been filed, says the party appreciates your service, that your actions prevented cowardice from spreading like a disease. He pats your shoulder and tells you to get some rest. You don't sleep that night. You lie on a cot that smells like ammonia, staring at the ceiling, blinking against the darkness. Your ears ring from the silence. Your hands twitch without purpose. You try to picture the girl in the photo, but all you see is the moment before he fell, how he never even looked up, just kept walking. You're transferred the next day, no explanation, just your name on a slip of paper and an order to report to a different sector by dusk. You pack your things, rifle, rations, a blanket still damp from snow, and walk to the new outpost alone. No one says goodbye. No one seems to notice you were ever there. The officer who gave you the order doesn't report for duty the next morning. Word spreads quietly, like steam escaping a cracked pipe. Someone says he was found behind the supply depot with a hole through the side of his neck. Clean shot. No witnesses, no suspects. The quartermaster shrugs when asked. The commissar doesn't mention it. You don't ask questions. You set up in your new post and stare through the scope like nothing has changed. There comes a time when they rotate you off the front with no ceremony, no paperwork, and no explanation that feels like the truth. The officer says it's for rest and reassignment. A few others say it's because you've served enough time on the line, but you know better. It's not about how long you've been there. It's how you've started looking over your shoulder between shots, how you flinch at footsteps behind you, how your finger trembles slightly when it's not holding a trigger. You're twitchy, unpredictable, not broken exactly, but cracked in ways that make officers nervous. And nervous officers don't write recommendations. They write transfer orders. You're sent inland, far enough from the sound of shellfire that your ears start ringing in the silence. The city is technically still standing, but it's only alive in the way a tree might be after it's been hollowed out by termites. Buildings remain, but they're slumped and blackened. Streets wind through piles of masonry and half-melted road signs. Smoke no longer pours from chimneys. It drifts from burned barrels where men warm their hands and speak only in murmurs. You're told to report to a recruitment post near what used to be the train station. The platform is gone. The clock tower leans at a bad angle. Somewhere, a piano plays a wrong note and keeps going like nothing happened. The recruitment station is a brick building with no windows and a door that sticks halfway open. Inside, it smells like dust and ink and sweat that's been left to ferment. The floor creaks beneath your boots, and the walls are lined with posters that still promise honour, courage, and eternal gratitude. Some are peeling, some are smeared. One shows a soldier aiming down a rifle with a caption that says, "Precision is patriotism." You wonder if he ever fired that shot, or if he was just posing. Your job isn't much. Mostly, you sit behind a table and sign off on intake reports. You count heads, check names against lists, sometimes run basic drills to see which recruits can hold a rifle without dropping it. You're not expected to speak often, which suits you fine. You nod when spoken to. You answer only what's necessary. The lieutenant in charge tells you you're a good example, someone who's seen real combat. You don't bother to correct him. You've seen a lot of things. Whether that qualifies as an example is a different question entirely. The recruits come in all shapes, too young, too old, too scared, too eager. Some try to impress you with stories of relatives who died in Stalingrad. Others ask about your medals. A few stare at your coat, hoping it will tell them something about what's waiting out there. One boy, barely 15, asks if killing someone ever feels like winning. You don't answer. He laughs nervously and moves on to the next officer. The locals avoid your eyes. You pass them in the street and see how they turn their heads, suddenly fascinated by cracks in the pavement or distant sounds that don't exist. Children give you wide berth. Women look past you. Men nod out of reflex, then stiffen like they regret it. You can feel them measuring the weight in your stare, wondering whether it's aimed at them or something behind them. You start walking slower, shorter strides, less noise, like a hunter out of season. Once, outside the station, a boy salutes you. He can't be more than 10. His boots don't match and his hat is too big. He stands at attention like he's seen in the films. Back straight, chin raised, one arm lifted sharp. You flinch, not visibly, just enough to make your stomach twist. You nod and walk past without meeting his eyes. He holds the salute until you're gone. You don't turn around. You begin sleeping in the office even though you've been given a bunk in the communal barracks. You say it's for convenience. In truth, it's the quiet. The barracks are too loud at night. Men laughing, coughing, dreaming out loud. One snores like a man drowning. Another cries in his sleep and denies it come morning. You need space to be still, to not be seen. The cot in the office is too short, so you sleep curled, knees to chest, arms wrapped around your rifle, like it's still the only thing that understands you. The windows rattle in the wind. The posters flutter faintly in the breeze. You wake up most nights with your fingers clenched, your jaw locked, your heart racing for reasons your body remembers, but your mind can't place. You sit up, drink from your canteen, and wait for the trembling to pass. Sometimes it doesn't. The recruits keep asking questions. Not all of them speak them out loud. Some just look at you too long. You can see it in their faces. The need to believe this ends in something clean. That there's a version of this war that feels like glory. You give them nothing. Not cruelty, not wisdom. Just silence. Just the weight of your presence, pressed into the air like a warning. One afternoon, you pass a storefront with a cracked mirror, still nailed to the frame. It's warped, bent at the edges, streaked with dirt. You catch your reflection by accident. It stops you cold. The man in the glass doesn't look like you, not the version you still carry from before. His face is longer, his eyes sunken, the lines around his mouth are deep, the skin at his temples drawn tight, The coat hangs loose over shoulders that are somehow both narrower and heavier than you remember. The beard is more grey than black. The expression isn't a scowl, but it isn't neutral either. It's just tired. The kind of tired that starts in the spine and moves outward. You stare for a long time, unsure of who you're looking at. Then you remember. Your grandfather looked like that. But he died 20 years ago. The war ends, but it doesn't feel like it. There's no final moment, no great silence after the storm. Just an announcement on a crackling loudspeaker, a letter pinned to the door of the recruitment station. A few bursts of celebration in places that still have alcohol left to waste. You watch from behind a dusty window as 3 soldiers embrace, laughing too loudly, their hands still gripping the rifles they apparently no longer need. Someone fires a shot in the air. Someone else starts singing off key. It doesn't reach you. Inside, you're given a discharge certificate and a ration book. The clerk doesn't make eye contact. She hands you your papers like you're another package being processed, another item ready for the shelf. She doesn't thank you. She doesn't ask your name. She just tells you the train leaves at dawn and waves for the next man in line. Your uniform isn't replaced. Your boots aren't cleaned. You're expected to leave as you are. Worn thin, patched up, blood still caked in the laces. A week later, a letter arrives. It's folded into quarters and printed on cheap paper, the ink smudged in places. It reads, "Thank you for your service to the motherland." That's it. No name, no signature, just a stamp that looks like it's been reused too many times. Tucked inside is a medal. It's smaller than you expected, lighter too, and bent slightly at the edge as if someone stepped on it before sliding it into the envelope. You turn it over in your hands a few times before placing it in your coat pocket. You don't wear it. No one calls you a hero. No one calls you anything. You step off the train into a town that barely remembers your name. The platform is cracked and overgrown. A dog barks in the distance. A woman walks past you, eyes straight ahead, hands buried deep in her sleeves. You pause in the square and look around, half expecting someone to appear from the fog of memory. Your mother, your brother, a friend from school who never learned to shave. No one does. The buildings are older, the trees are smaller. You don't recognize the road to your house until you're already walking down it. The house is still standing. Somehow, the shutters hang crooked. The fence has collapsed in 2 places. The door creaks like it remembers your weight, but not your face. Inside, the air is stale, thick with dust and the kind of silence that accumulates only after long neglect. Your mother is gone. A neighbour told you in a letter months ago, maybe a year. You didn't cry when you read it then. You don't cry now. You move through the rooms with your boots still on, too tired to feel guilty about the mud on the floorboards. You find a half-broken chair and sit. It creaks under your weight, but it holds. You sleep the first night without blankets. The bed feels wrong. Too soft, too still. Your back has learned the shape of stone and splinters. The mattress gives in ways your body doesn't trust. So you curl up on the floorboards, coat still wrapped around you, rifle within reach. You don't dream. Or maybe you do, but you don't remember it. When you wake, the sun is too bright through the window. You pull the curtain and sit with your back to the wall, knees to your chest, and wait for the silence to settle again. In the mornings, you make tea from old leaves and boiled water. It tastes like regret, but it's warm. You sweep dust into corners and leave it there. You fix the door hinge with a nail you find under the stove. You light a fire, then let it die. You don't go into town. You don't go anywhere. Once, a group of boys passes by outside, shouting and kicking a ball made of twine. One of them glances toward the window and sees you. He stops, then keeps walking, quieter now. The ball rolls into the ditch. You open your coat one day and find the medal still in the pocket. You stare at it a long time before placing it in the drawer beside the stove. You don't open that drawer again. The ration book gets you flour, potatoes, salt. and once a bar of soap. You stand in line like everyone else. No one notices you. You want to be grateful for that, but it feels worse somehow. You see other veterans sometimes, men with missing limbs, men with haunted eyes. You nod at them. Sometimes they nod back. Mostly, they just keep walking. You try writing again, not letters, just thoughts. But the words don't come right. Your handwriting stutters across the page, unfamiliar and uneven. You stop halfway through the second line, rip it out, and burn it in the stove. You tell yourself it's because the ink was bad. You don't try again. The days pass without markers. You mark time by meals and how many matches are left in the box. You stop checking the calendar. You stop wondering what day of the week it is. You sharpen your knife, even though there's nothing to use it on. You clean your rifle every other morning. You don't know why. At night, you lie on the floor, wrapped in your coat, eyes fixed on the ceiling. You listen. You always listen. The wind taps against the window frame. The house shifts with age. Your breath echoes too loud in your own ears. Then come the footsteps, soft at first, then more certain. Not real ones, not outside, just the sound your mind plays when the silence gets too thick. You hear them in the hallway, in the yard, behind the door that's locked even though there's nothing worth stealing. You tell yourself it's the house settling. You don't believe it. Some nights you call out, not loudly, just a whisper, just to see if anyone answers. No one does. You survive. You keep waking up. You keep breathing. You keep eating food that tastes like paper and standing in lines that go nowhere. You survive and the world keeps moving, and eventually spring arrives, soft and damp, carrying the scent of growing things you no longer recognize. And that, somehow, is the worst part. That brings us to the end of tonight's quiet unravelling, the story of a man who survived the Eastern Front, not through glory or luck, but through silence, obedience, and the slow erosion of everything that made him human. If you're still listening, thank you for drifting through history with me. If you'd like early access to more of these slow, unvarnished descents into the forgotten machinery of history, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with other forgotten corners of history you'd like to see covered. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S., Amanda Lampke, and Rich Davis. Sleep well.